Hello my crochet friends, it's Yobi here today, and in this video I'm sharing with you everything related to slip stitch. Slip stitch is the name of this stitch in US, UK, Australia and India. For this stitch you can use a foundation chain that is formed by any number of stitches. When you are checking a written pattern, slip stitch is going to be represented by this abbreviation, SL and ST. And if you are checking a crochet chart, the symbol for a slip stitch is a black dot. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make the slip stitch here that it is colored in red when the previous row is a single crochet, and how to make the slip stitch when the previous row is a double crochet. If you want to learn how to make the slip stitch when the previous row was a foundation chain, I have a separate video about this and I leave you the link down below. This is our first sample. In this case, we are taking a foundation chain formed by 10 chains, and the rows are formed by single crochet where the turning chain is just one chain. If you need more information about this sample, I will leave you the link down below. So, assuming that we have this sample ready, we are going to work the last row with slip stitches. Remember that the slip stitch is a stitch that does not have a height. Therefore, there is no need of having a turning chain. So now, let's do the work in our sample. In this position, I just finished the last row of my single crochet sample. Now, what I'm going to do is to turn my work. And here, in this position, I'm going to make slip stitches. One slip stitch on each stitch of the previous row. Okay? So, for that, I'm going to introduce the hook here in these gaps. Okay, I introduce my hook here and check that I'm taking the whole stitch. So that means the two parts of the stitch that are forming a V shape. Okay, so in this position I'm going to yarn over and come out through this gap. And what I'm going to do is to pull the second loop through the first one without making any yarn over. Okay, now our first slip stitch is ready. We are going to do the second. So I introduce my hook, I yarn over and come out through this gap. Now I have two loops on my hook and I pull the second loop through the first one. The second slip stitch is ready. So I'm going to continue working until the end of the row and show you the result. Here I'm going to make the last slip stitch of this row. So as you can see here, this is the gap. So I introduce my hook, check that I'm taking the full stitch here, then yarn over and come out through this gap, and I'm going to pull the second loop through the first one. Okay, and now my row of slip stitches is ready. As a good practice, I always recommend to count the number of stitches. We should have the same number of stitches than number of chains in the foundation chain. In this case, I had 10 chains, so here I'm going to count this V, okay, or these two parts from one stitch. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So our row is complete and we can close this. Now I'm going to show you how to make a slip stitch when the previous row is double crochet. So here I'm taking as a sample 10 chains in the foundation chain and 3 chains as turning chain and a sample that is full of double crochet. So in this case, I'm going to make the last row here marking red, where on each stitch of the previous row I'm going to make 1 slip stitch. As I explained you before, this slip stitch does not have any height, therefore there is not need of having a turning chain. Now let's do the work. So here I just work this row that is formed by double crochet, and now I'm going to work the last row of this sample with slip stitches. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to turn my work, and in this position I'm going to make 1 slip stitch on each stitch of the previous row. So here we can see the gaps where we are going to introduce our hook. For the lip stitch, you introduce the hook through the hole, then check that you are taking both sides of the stitch. So here you can see this V shape. Then you yarn over and come out through the gap. We have 2 loops on our hook. I'm going to pull the second loop through the first one without making a yarn over. Now the slip stitch is ready. We are going to do the next. Introduce the hook through the gap, then we yarn over, come out through the gap, and here I'm going to pull the second loop through the first one. Okay, I'm going to continue working until the end of the row. So here I'm almost at the end of this row. 2 stitches are missing, so here we have to introduce the hook through this stitch and check that we have taken both parts of the stitch. Then we yarn over, come out through the gap, and here pull the second loop through the first one. And for working the last stitch, I will recommend you that if you haven't used a stitch marker, you change to a smaller stitch so you can have a look where to introduce your hook. I'm going to try to zoom in so you can see it better. And here, if you follow this little string coming from the previous stitch, there is a loop that forms a kind of 6 number. If you are unable to see the 6 number, I will leave a link to a photo in the info box where you can see the 6 number clearly, so you might check this to identify in a better way this loop here. So what I do is introduce my hook behind the loop, then I continue yarn over, come out through this gap, and then I'm going to pull the second loop through the first one. And with this I have completed my row of slip stitches. And now this is the end result of both samples. If you are interested in knowing how to make the slip stitch on top of a foundation chain to form a cord, I will leave you the link down below for a separate video. And that's all what I have for you, my friends. Leave me a comment down below if you have any question of any comment. I love to read your comments. I thank you for being here, and if you have enjoyed the video or you have learned something new, please give a like to this video. I thank you a lot. I leave you a big hug and see you next time. Bye!